We've been making videos here since 2012, and in that time, there has definitely been a surge in indie and alternative tabletop role-playing games to the kind of big one, Dungeons and Dragons. Pathfinder has continued to grow. They added in Starfinder, and there are a whole bunch of other, publishers, kind of medium-sized publishers, as well as indie designers who are putting out tabletop RPG games. And I will say, every now and then, when I see a new game like appear in our inbox of somebody asking us to review it, or I just see stuff about it online, part of me is like, oh, I'm really excited. This sounds really interesting. And there's always a small voice in my head that is kind of like, oh my gosh, another one. So today I kind of wanted to dive a little bit into that and kind of address the like, do we have too many TTRPGs? Just in the last year, we've reviewed about a dozen games on this channel, and we've had probably that many, if not more, who've reached out about doing reviews that we've not been able to do for various reasons. Usually it's a time constraint. Occasionally it's something that's like, this just doesn't vibe with like my interests or the interests of what seems to be our audience. So I just kind of say like, hey, this one's not for us to review. But most of them have been just time, like I can only put so much time into reading and reviewing TTRPG games, especially when I don't have time right now to play them. More on that in next video. So I've kind of put together some like pros and cons of this surge in TTRPGs to try and answer the question, are there just too many? Okay, so one positive is that we've seen a like flourish of innovation because of various reasons. There are a lot more indie RPGs who have been able to experiment with things and branch out of kind of the more legacy games. We've seen a bunch of new mechanics. There's been definitely a push for narrative first or GM less games that I feel like, you know, not D&D's strength when you look at historically. The addition of safety tools that even some of the larger publishers are starting to incorporate, but that started within the more indie game community, as well as diving into really unique genres or themes within these games. So this has resulted in a really diverse like ecosystem within the gaming world. So that's definitely, I think, a positive. Like, you are seeing games coming out nowadays that wouldn't have been able to come out like back in the even 90s, even early 2000s, because they just had a hard time reaching a wide enough audience to actually like, you know, make enough money to put out the game, or even just to find the audience. I'm sure there probably were some, but again, it's being talked about a lot less. Now, the other side of this, because there are so many, I feel like some players, especially new players, might be experiencing some choice paralysis. You just have given everybody so many options that it's hard to decide, what system do I want to pick for this game? What game do I want to even play? How do I find a group? That's another point I will come up to. But I feel like a new player walking into a gaming store and seeing this like wall of all sorts of different kinds of RPGs, that can be a bit overwhelming. And if you don't have any kind of like entry point into the hobby, somebody that can kind of like ask you questions and steer you towards the right game, then I feel like, I mean, that's one of the reasons I think D&D is still so popular, because it is an easy entry point that people have like this cultural knowledge that they can use to kind of know what it is that they're getting going in. But there might be a better game out there, but it just can be a bit overwhelming to figure it out. Even for me, like if I were to sit down today and be like, great, I'm going to start running a brand new game, we've got them downstairs. There are a handful of them behind me, and we have like a whole bookshelf worth of gaming books that, like, which one do I pick? A second in the positive is, I kind of touched on a little bit in the first one, but because there are lower barriers to publishing, we're getting a lot more voices in TTRPG games. We're seeing games created by marginalized creators, games that are created outside of the traditional fantasy mold, and games rooted in different cultures and storytelling traditions. I think this is great. It broadens the hobby. It introduces people to new folklore or new kind of ways of thinking, new experiences, because you're getting to play this game through perhaps a like entry point, viewpoint that is not just the stereotypical white straight male gamer. Like, that D&D feels very much like the vanilla white male gamer vibe. But when you look at all of these different indie RPGs, and even some of the like medium-sized ones, you're seeing a lot more diversity there. Now, larger publishers are starting to incorporate this, but I feel like we saw this first kind of in the indie RPG scene. Okay, another on the negative is short-lived games or lack of support. The great thing about indie RPGs is that anybody can publish them. The bad thing about indie RPGs is anyone can publish them. And sometimes a designer might have a great idea, but they have a hard time finding the right audience, or they just don't get the support. I can't tell you how many great game ideas I've seen like that just have kind of fizzled out. Either the Kickstarter was not successful, or it was, but then the thing never actually came out. There are a handful that this has happened where they just, I think, didn't necessarily realize like all the things that went into publishing an RPG, so they didn't budget correctly. Or interest fades after the initial hype, so you don't have as many of the supporting rule set or expansions that allow the games to have replayability and kind of stay in the gaming kind of mindset and attention. They may also have unfinished rules or, mechanics that weren't as fully tested, just because they don't have the support that some of the larger publishers have. So sometimes I feel like that can be, like, you're playing a little bit of a risk of, like, am I going to invest myself emotionally and financially into a new game and new gaming system, and then maybe just it fizzles out or it kind of just disappears. Back on the positives, we are seeing a lot more tailored, focused experiences. A lot of these games are being built to do one thing extremely well. You want high lethality dungeon crawling? Mork Bork. You want drama-focused teen angst? Monster Hearts. You want cozy, cottagey vibes? Wander Home. You want a solo game that blends sewing with storytelling? Mending. Because we have a lot of these focused experience, you're not forcing D&D to be everything, and you can really pick the perfect game for the kind of experience you want to have. Back on the negative, I mentioned this a little bit, but I feel like we can see a little bit of a rules fragmentation, as well as a universal gaming language fragmentation, because there are so many options. Every group might choose something wildly different, so that can make it difficult to find a group that wants to play the game that you want to play. Not only what kind of game, like, okay, we're going to use this system, but then what kind of game, but what system are we using? Like, that adds an added level of difficulty. It can be hard to find GMs because you might be like, I'm really interested in playing this game, but is there a GM in my area or who I can find online who knows this game and is willing to run it with me? And it gets rid of some of the shared vocabulary, because a lot of games are, I can't tell you how many games, instead of saying game master, have narrator or storyteller or the oh God, I can't remember. There's one that I reviewed recently that had an even obscure one. But just in that, there's this fragmentation of this vocabulary of the rules within the game, which it makes sense for games that are game master-less to not have that term. But I sometimes find it annoying to be like, just call it a game master. I understand Dungeon Master is D&D, so let's not call it Dungeon Master. Just use it, call it Game Master. You don't have to come up with a brand new term for this already established thing. But then, because you have all these different mechanics and rule sets, some of them are similar, some of them are different. I feel like there's just this lack of universality to the language that has come somewhat from the urge to be like, this is different, this isn't just D&D with a like facade put on it, but to feel more mechanically different, even if the rule set is different. And yes, it is sometimes helpful to have different terms for different mechanics, and that I understand, but there's just this lack of consistency that I feel like when I first was getting into the hobby 10 years ago, there was this kind of universal language. Whether you think we've got too many or not enough RPGs, I think we can all agree that sometimes you need something sweet to eat while you're playing games. For that, we're going to go over to today's video sponsor. Every adventure deserves great company, good food, and a little magic at the table. Brass Dragon Bistro crafts fantasy-inspired treats for game nights, gifting, and cozy moments alike. One of my favorites that always finds its way to the center of the table, the Halfling Hot Cocoa Cosmic Caramels. They're rich, soft, and comforting, like a warm mug of cocoa shared by a halfling hearth. Perfect for mid-session treats, post-game wind-downs, or anytime you want something a little cozy and indulgent. Whether you're stocking a snack table, building the perfect gift bundle, or treating yourself between quests, Brass Dragon Bistro has something for every adventurer. Explore the full menu at brassdragonbistro.com and bring a little comfort, flavor, and fantasy to every table. Back on the positives, I feel like with a lot of these new games, there in some ways are easier like, or more accessible entry points, because a lot of the games we've been seeing recently are rules light. That makes it easier to dive into. You're not overwhelming a new player with, here's a giant rule book you need to memorize, but like, okay, here's a one-page document that tells you everything that you need to know to play the game. Also, a lot of these games do have a low or no cost kind of entry point. They'll have, a download this document to get a like quick start entry into the game. I really appreciate that because especially for new games, games that, you might have a harder time finding people who are experienced in it already. Hey, I can download this, I can try it out before I invest a whole lot of money into it and see, hey, is it a good fit for me? Also, is it a good fit for my table? Also, a lot of them can be played as one-shots, or they designed completely to be one-shots. And I feel like that's a really good entry point for new players because it's not, come up with this character that you're going to play for the next 2 years. Instead, it's, hey, we'll get together, we'll play this one-shot, see if we like it. And then we can keep playing more games in the system, whether it's a system that's designed to kind of be played in like chapters or just a whole bunch of one-shots. Another side to the boon in RPGs is I feel like it can be harder on those forever GMs, the kind of, we have a gaming group, we may switch up the systems, but we have one person who's consistently the game master. Because look, they have to learn new mechanics. They have to, or if there's somebody who like organizes gameplay, they have to teach these mechanics now to new players every time we switch to a new system. They have to manage wildly different rules and adventure types. Like if you've gotten used to the way to build an adventure in D&D, switching to how do I plan an adventure for something like the Cypher system, which is built to kind of be a lot more like open world. The players kind of determine a lot more of what happens and the game master reacts rather than kind of being like, here's the story that we are going to play and there are different paths you can go down. This is why I feel like a lot of people still default to D&D, even if there might be a better fit for their group, just because it's the like, let's just stick to D&D because that's what everybody in this group knows. We can homebrew, we can, house rule, alter rules to play the kind of game we want to play, but we're at least all on the same page and not investing a whole lot of mental energy into learning a new system, as well as financial investment. Because, if you've bought all of the D&D books, that's a huge investment. And to then suddenly be like, we're not going to play this game anymore, like, okay, well, that's just pretty things on my shelf now. Back on the positive, I feel like this rise in the indie RPGs especially, but the more variety within RPGs has also helped create a more welcoming community. Because we're seeing a lot more like indie designers, I feel like there's a lot more of the closer creator to player interaction. That's how a lot of the smaller designers get word out, is you have direct interaction between, I designed this game and I'm talking to the people playing this game. That doesn't happen as much with the bigger studios. It's welcomed a lot more experimentation, because you're not like, okay, I'm going to put out a digital PDF game. I'm not going to invest a whole bunch of money into publishing a book. I can experiment with this. I can do things that maybe are a little different. And it also has encouraged a lot of fan-made supplements. We've even seen some fan-made supplements help lead to people getting careers in some of the larger publishers, or even some publishers collecting fan-made stuff and putting it out there. I feel like it has helped foster a lot more collaboration in the community, and because we're seeing a lot more diversity within the voices, it's just kind of naturally becoming more welcoming, because new players or people who have been playing for a long time but have not seen themselves in the people who are creating the games are now seeing people that's like, we have something in common and I can see myself in this hobby a little bit more. And sometimes even just going and deep diving into one specific system, you can kind of find a little bit more of this niche, essentially fandom, rather than feeling like, oh my god, I'm stepping into this huge giant community that, do I fit, do I not? I kind of touched on this earlier, but the last kind of negative that I thought about is player recruitment issues. Finding players for niche systems can be difficult. Even if you have somebody who knows the game and wants to run it, you still need people to play in the game. Unless you're doing a solo RPG, you need other players. This can be hard if you don't have an established group that is willing to experiment. A lot of gaming stores have D&D night or Pathfinder night or Starfinder night, but they don't necessarily have the indie RPG night, or even Cypher System. You see that a lot less, so it's a little bit harder to go and find them. If it's not an established RPG, that can also be harder to even if you just go and be like, hey, can I put a flyer up? Or I'm going to post in my local, whatever forum to see if I can find any players. I feel like, oh, if I don't know the gaming system, if I see looking for these players, I'm less likely to click on that, even if I'm looking for a game to play, than I am if it's a system that I'm familiar with. Because, okay, I gotta learn something new. Or I just don't, looking over stuff, I look at it and think, oh, I'm not familiar with that. I don't know if it's even a RPG, tabletop RPG game. It could be a card game. It could be people looking to play a online video game. There's not that instant recognition of oh, somebody's looking for D&D players. Great. So a few kind of big takeaways from this is I feel like the hobby right now is in this kind of Cambrian explosion where we've just seen so many games that are coming out. Some of these games are going to end up vanishing, some are going to stick around, and you know, a few of them might become the new D&D. There's always that possibility. Now, market saturation does not mean there's creative saturation. The creative, even if the market feels a little crowded right now, the creative output is still healthy. I think the limiting factor now is discoverability instead of imagination. Like, that's, I think, why I'm still constantly excited when I see new RPG games, because I'm like, oh my gosh, I hadn't thought about this as a game, but this sounds fun. I want to play this, even though I've got a whole bookcase full of games that I could play. And I think this has also led to a rise in play culture over system culture. We're seeing a lot more, you know, increasingly players are focused on story structure, safety tool, themes, like session length, even those like more practical things, and choosing the games based on the vibe rather than necessarily the rules. Actual play content has definitely helped shift this landscape. I mean, we still have like Critical Role that's using D&D, but even Dimension 20 has branched out and used, like, they use Kids on Bikes, unmodified versions of Kids on Bikes for the Mentopolis, I think, if I'm correct. I know they've used a couple of smaller publisher games for a couple of the games that they've played. And there are so many actual plays that do play indie games or play smaller publishers beyond just D&D. This, I feel like, is definitely helping discovery. You know, it's helping people be like, I never heard about that, but I'm watching a show on it. And it also in some ways helps introduce, like, now I understand how this game is played, so I can go play it, especially if you're somebody who, like, reading through the game doesn't necessarily make sense. You need to, like, play it or at least experience watching somebody else play it. So what do you think? Are there too many tabletop RPGs? I'm still on the fence. I feel like there are definitely a handful that I'm like, this feels like D&D with a facade on the front, when you change some names or you change a couple mechanics, but was this necessary? But for the most part, I'm still super excited for new games that are coming out. I'm excited to see where the hobby goes, what new experiences, what new ways of playing games people figure out, and yeah, I'm still loving tabletop RPGs, even if right now I'm not having a whole lot of time to play them. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please make sure you like and subscribe, and I will see you next time on Roll for Initiative. Bye!